minutes before we let you get into a little break and then show you the interface and how it works after the coffee break, how do we even have a new interface now? And this is the VOICE CLARIAH project. So I've already given you a lot of the history, so I'm not going to repeat this before. You've heard this by now, but basically, I think VOICE Online ran smoothly for, more than 5 years, and quite consistently for more than 5 years. But I would say from around 2017 onwards, give or take, we did have major technological issues, and like us being then at the University of Vienna, Barbara Seidelhofer and myself, being the us here, most immediately, we were not technicians, so we were not in a place to personally solve these issues. We had gaps in availability where the server needed to be restarted. The interface was becoming less reliable, and for example, we got several emails from people over the years, probably more than several, who were used to using VOICE Online for teaching, as Stephanie just mentioned. But of course, also I myself, if you do a course, you want to be sure that the corpus that you want to use actually works when you want it to use. Otherwise, you have a problem with your 20-odd students at hand when they want to use it and the interface is not running. And this is essentially what was happening. Also, we did always have the XML archived and available for download, but it is quite clear, I think, maybe also to many of you, that downloading and working with the XML files and actually working with a quite intuitive and easy access interface speaks to different user groups. So for instance, in university teaching, if you really want to have students work with XML, it's going to be a different type of course, I would say, than if you want them to do a quick study focusing on pragmatics or multilingual communication, intercultural communication using the online interface. So we're in the process of, quite sadly, noticing that we were losing users of VOICE and that we basically couldn't do so much personally to stop this. So we needed a full technological overhaul, but as I said before, this does not work without funding. And we tried informally to get some funding, but for a while that didn't work. And then I was extremely fortunate to find out about a specific small grant scheme within CLARIAH, which is a combination of Clarin and Daria, specifically then with the Austrian strand. The Clarin and Daria being big European research research infrastructure projects. Maybe some of you have heard these names before. If you're located within Europe, maybe you haven't. So these are connected to bigger European enterprises and they have national strands. And CLARIAH is partly, not only connected to the ACDH-CH, where we're hosting here today. So I got together with my colleague Daniel Choppa, who was a co-principal investigator for the first year of the project. And essentially, we got our heads together, wrote a short proposal, and we're super happy that we got funding from CLARIAH to actually then get this new version of VOICE Online built. However, it also has to be acknowledged that the funding scheme worked in a way that there were also in-kind contributions, so basically staff hours that needed to be committed from both cooperating host institutions, that is the ACDH at the Austrian Academy of Sciences, as well as the University of Vienna. So that's why we also always have this dual representation here as part of the team. The team then got together. We started, as the pandemic started, in April 2020 is when our first regular meetings really kicked off. And our aim was in general to do a new infrastructure and the backend, but especially a new front end, which required a new backend for VOICE Online. So you can see here one of our team photos, because we are very much in that sense used to this environment, because the whole project worked like this. We met once in the summer of 2020 in person, and then again last year in the summer in person, and the rest was all Zoom and online. And part of the team are not only, if you could go to the next slide, the 5 people doing the tool gallery today. So Stephanie, Ruth, Oma, and Hannes. Of course, also Barbara joined us from time to time, consulting on bigger decisions to be taken in the project. Then Daniel Schopper, as I said, who was really essential in getting the project off the ground, and it wouldn't have been possible to run this project or get it going, without him. And then another integral part was very central was Hans Christian Breuer, who is a web designer who really programmed the entire front end surface of the interface that you're going to see and try out and work with in the afternoon. Yeah. Something that has been mentioned in passing, and I will mention it again in passing, is that everything that you will see in the afternoon would not have been possible in the way that it was possible to set up the technologies, more current and modern technologies on top of that, if voice did not always have and had not always have this sort of XML backbone in the background, which for most people who are more applied linguists interested in conversation, they don't actually want to work with the XML files because it looks like that, and the current XML looks a lot worse, the version 3, in terms of you can hardly physically read it as a human. But the decision was taken already very early in the first voice project, from the beginning, I would say, to definitely make sure that we would have XML files and to orient to the Text Encoding Initiative, TEI, as a standard. The TEI P5 guidelines were published in 2007. So that was really good timing for us because we were just completing the data collection. We had a lot of material already. So that's why it was possible to actually cater everything to these TEI P5 guidelines, which are with some adaptations still in place today. And this has been really essential for everything that we were able to then carry out with the data almost 15 years later. However, through the structure of the project, if you can go through the next to the next slide, as I said, partly because of the history of having 2 consecutive projects with slightly different teams and a number of other factors, one of the peculiarities, if you like, was that we had one XML and one front end for the regular version of voice, with the focus on already in the first interface on spoken markup, switching it on and off and having different views of the spoken markup. And then we had a second version of the XML and of the front end interface with a focus on the part of speech tagging, because this was carried out, as Ruth explained, in the later project phase. And so we had 2 separate XMLs and we had 2 separate online interfaces. And one of the major things that happened in the VOICE CLARIAH project now, if you can go to the next slide, thank you, was that in talking about how we wanted to build our front end, we decided that we were going to try and succeed, thanks to Hannes Pirker largely, to merge these different XML versions into one expanded XML version, which I said, if you want to read it as a human being, is quite painful for your eyes. But with the new merged TEI conform voice 3 XML, which has also recently just been released, it's now available in the ARCA, the research infrastructure at the ACDH-CH, and in a few weeks we'll also be releasing a zip package for download again, like people from Voice may be used to, and we'll be tweeting and informing people about this in case they're interested. But what the new TEI XML version of Voice 3 XML has is that it is tokenized. To the point where we now have W tags, for instance, which is something we didn't have before. So you have word tags. The pause version was tokenized, but slightly different really than it is tokenized now. And the XML includes all the pause and lemma information that is in Voice 2 pause, but it also includes all the spoken markup that is in the regular Voice 1, Voice 2 versions of the XML. And then on the basis of that, and Hannes will tell you more about this tomorrow, we generated in the project verticals to feed into a no-sketch engine, which is essentially the technical backbone of Voice Online that you don't get to see as an outside user, however, because that's what's carrying out the searches in the hidden area of the backend. And Hannes will talk about no sketching tomorrow, so I won't provide any details with this today, with the eventual goal to develop a front end for Voice Online that was current and up to date, but also to try and as much as possible, because Oma and Hannes would also have more internal technical knowledge of the host institution, the ACDH, to choose web technologies that hopefully would give us a good chance of maintenance technologically being feasible, not only for them personally, but also for other people working at the host institution. Because if you choose technologies that no one can actually maintain or knows, then it's going to make it more tricky to actually keep the resource running. And then we used GitHub a lot and archived everything, and in portions and larger chunks, making the all the code that is also part of designing the front end then available open access as well through Git-based repositories. Yeah, and with that, I think the next slide is the last one before the break, because what you will then see after the coffee or the tea or beverage of your choice is that what you can now do in Voice Online, we think, is quite expanded and powerful, not only technologically new, but also in terms of the research that you can carry out there. So because of the new XML and the implementation of all of this through verticals and no sketch engine, we now have the possibility for not only searching for words normally and for pause, but also for markup and selected features of markup and combining all of these things. And you will get some thinking and typing and searching tasks later on. We have more display styles than we had before. For instance, a lot of flexibility also of how you want to display the part of speech tags, but also the voice markup. And we have not only bookmarks, but also a download function for the search results, which I actually also really used extensively for the first time about 2 weeks ago. And I did find it really very useful to be able to download search results in different formats in different ways. So there's hopefully a lot of work that can be done with Voice Online, which is what we will tell you about after coffee. But then again, as Oma and Hannes will say about tomorrow, the idea is also that the technology hopefully can be provided people have the right type of expertise, can be used for other resources as long as credit is given. We are more than happy if the technology can also inspire and use and be useful for others, for other corpora, for other projects.